For me, programmatic video in Europe is really moving into the mainstream. So what we've seen in Europe is, many publishers have really been looking at programmatic video in a very kind of experimental kind of phase, but now we're starting to see a shift towards a much more strategic use of programmatic video. So these are publishers that pioneered display, programmatic, and are now looking at doing the same thing for video. But the question is, how big is programmatic video in Europe and how are the different markets developing? So we actually commissioned the first piece of research ever across Europe to understand the adoption of programmatic video in the five key markets, so the UK, France, Spain, Italy and Germany. And the reason that we wanted to do this was obviously the different markets are adopting at slightly different rates. It's important to get some credible third-party research. So we worked with IHS, and IHS do all of the analytics for IB across Europe, and they did the study, which was released in September of this year. And what it showed, number one, was that programmatic video is established in Europe. Across those five markets this year, about 12% of all online video is being traded programmatically. I think what's really interesting is the study showed that by 2017, so within a matter of 4 years, that figure is going to increase to about a third. So I think the message for publishers across Europe is if you're not trading programmatically, then your market's going to shrink by a third by the time we get to 2017. And I think as a result of that, many publishers are now seriously looking at how they form strategies around programmatic trading. Now, within the study, what it showed was the UK is the largest or most developed market for programmatic video. And to a degree, you would expect that because typically the UK often follows suit very quickly or adopts particularly US technologies very quickly. However, more interesting was the role of France. And France at the moment is the second biggest market for programmatic video. But I think more importantly, France is showing real innovation. So as an example, we've seen publisher collectives form in France and become very powerful entities. And this is where a group of premium publishers come together to create their own marketplace as a collective. And in other markets, we've seen premium publishers work, but they've worked in isolation on their own. And the second thing we've seen in France is a lot of creation of new technologies. So I think if you look at both the programmatic space but also the creative space around video content, there's some really exciting things coming out of France. The third market, which I think is worth talking about, is Germany. And Germany should, by all rights, be the biggest programmatic market in Europe. It's got the biggest population, it's got one of the strongest economies, it's got one of the biggest display marketplaces, yet for some reason they seem to be slow in adoption of programmatic. And in fact, if you look at their history, Germany tends to be slower in adopting digital technologies and things like e-commerce. And I think the reason for that is Germany tends to be a market full of engineers. They like to create their own technology and they like to do things their own way. So what we sense is the German market will grow quite rapidly in programmatic. It's just going to do it in its own way and in its own time. And then of the other two markets, which are much smaller, the Spanish market again is showing great innovation. Obviously the southern European markets have been hit quite hard with the economic climate. So as a result, publishers are looking at much more innovative ways to monetize their inventory and looking outside of their borders for different ideas that will help them generate business. So we're seeing premium publishers and broadcasters in Spain being very active in the programmatic space, and as well as in Italy. And I think Italy is a really exciting market. We think the Italians are really driving ahead in terms of trying to understand what to do programmatically and to bring this on board. So the research itself was designed to really showcase a broad spectrum of publishers. So we certainly included premium newspaper and magazine publishers. We also included broadcasters, so some very strong European-wide broadcast entities that were included in the study. And typically we also looked at kind of more long-tail publishers. So we had a good scope across the piece. And actually what the report showed was, irrespective of the type of publisher, they fell into three buckets. The first bucket were publishers who were very conservative about programmatic. So it's something they hadn't really engaged with. They were a bit possibly fearful. They didn't quite understand how to make programmatic work for them. The second group, which was the largest group, were the experimental publishers. So these were the guys that had already started trying different things around programmatic, making a bit of inventory available and seeing what happened. And then the third group, which was a smaller group, were the guys that already had formed a strategic approach to programmatic. So again, typically these were the bigger publishers who'd who have the infrastructure within their business to run display programmatically, and they were looking to take those exact techniques and apply them to video. Most events or panels that I've been on recently have been speaking about cross-screen adoption of programmatic within video. So mobile is a very strong area. We're already seeing a huge demand for mobile video inventory and for that inventory to be available programmatically. So within our business, for example, we have appointed a head of mobile and connected devices, and his role is really to help us make sure that we have the right tools and capabilities for publishers to leverage that. And then the second piece is around connected television, and I think as you mentioned, France I think is one of the biggest countries in the world around the adoption of smart television and interactive television. So what we're now doing is we're working with app developers, so TV app developers and businesses like broadcasters in France, to understand how we can make that inventory available on a platform so that buyers can access that programmatically. And even at this early test stage, we're seeing really quite incredible results. So our view as a business is whatever platform your video sits on, you should be able to monetize that effectively programmatically.